welcome everybody. Thanks very much for joining us on this lovely lunchtime seminar. So we just wanted to sort of do a little bit of housekeeping first. So my name's Hannah. I'm the Project Engagement Officer for Calverley Old Hall. I'm just going to do a little few bits of housekeeping before we start. Firstly, we'd like to say thank you very much to the Lottery Fund, without who this wouldn't be possible, because they've given us an awful lot of money to be able to actually work on this wonderful project, which Karen's going to tell you a lot more about. This session is going to be recorded, so it should already have started recording. Basically, it should record for the full session, and then we'll share it afterwards with anybody that's missed the session, or if there's anything you want to catch up on or recap on later on. That's absolutely fine. If you want to ask any questions, if you just pop them in the bottom at the Q&A, just to the left of your screen, you'll see a little box that says Q&A. So if you just enter them there, and then I'll put any questions to Karen at the end of the webinar. So if you'd like to show any captions, because obviously sometimes it's a little bit more difficult to hear, if they just pop on the captions box at the bottom, it says show captions right in the centre there, and then you can watch it with the captions on. Okay, so firstly, I'm going to hand over now to Karen Lim. So Karen is our architect for the Calverley Old Hall project. So do you want to do a little bit of an introduction about yourself, Karen, and a little bit about Calverley Old Hall and what your involvement is?
So thank you very much for inviting us to talk about Calverley Old Hall. I'm here with my colleague Simon Murgatroyd, and we have been working on this project for about 5 years. We're missing Chris Cowper, but he's another member of our team. And we first visited Calverley for a competition that was being held by the Landmark Trust in 2017. So this is just really scratching the surface of what we have found as we have developed the scheme from competition stage. So just a little bit about Calverley Old Hall. It's a Grade 1 listed manor house in West Yorkshire. It dates from the 12th century and has undergone many changes. In 1981, the Landmark Trust acquired the property, which had been divided into 9 tenancies. Work was carried out in the 1980s and the 90s with the demolition of the 18th and 19th century cottages and outhouses to the south-east of the chapel and the northwest of the lodging block, and a small part of the property was converted into holiday accommodation. Some parts of the building, namely the solar and the Great Hall, have been in a state of dereliction since then. At the time of the competition, it was listed within Category B in Historic England's Risk Register. So you can see on this slide, this was the information that we were given. We had a rough idea of where the lodging block was. That was where the meeting was hosted, on the north side. And after a brief introduction by the Landmark Trust, we were free to look around the site. On the right-hand side, you can see there's a conservation management plan, and that was produced by FAS Heritage and has been really useful in identifying the significance of different areas of the building. And then just a few, there's a photograph and a water curve of the site, and you can see that it's undergone many changes. So the competition brief gave an outline history and the client's requirement for an 8 to 10 person holiday let with some form of community space. The building was to be repaired to the highest conservation standards, but the client was open to the design approach in that it could be contemporary or historicist, but wished to avoid explicit restoration. So here I'm reminded of the Japanese philosophy of wabi-sabi, translated as the art of imperfection, which seeks to give old objects a new lease of life and beauty by making changes to their composition which are obvious. A good example of this technique is used for repairing ceramics, and it's called kintsugi, and the direct translation is a golden repair. This has been used for centuries, and in a similar way we have tried to weave in our new elements into the building that will improve accessibility and support an economically sustainable future. However, a lot of our repair will hopefully go unnoticed, except for an awareness that the building is well maintained easy to use and pleasing to the eye. In this presentation, we'll try to show you the process we followed, highlighting general principles for sustainability and conservation, and identifying what we've come to regard as the golden thread used to link spaces with insertions that are clearly identifiable. This has to be open to change as new discoveries are made. And you'll be able to see that we have actually had to change quite a lot from the original design. It's essential to work very closely with other consultants and your clients, and then on site with your contractor and their subcontractors. The tender documents are always only part of the story because the building will reveal new challenges during the process of stripping out and repairing. When the contractor has taken possession of the site, changes need to be dealt with very quickly and efficiently in order to keep within the budget and programme. We've been very fortunate at Calverley to have been given time to carry out a lot of the opening up works ahead of the main contract. Now we go to the site. First impression of Calverley Old Hall is that it is buffeted on all sides by residential property. In the locality, there is a consistency of ashlar masonry and stone slate roofs, but the properties that back onto the Old Hall from the southwest and northwest are 20th century rendered masonry with concrete tiles. From the outside, Calverley could be mistaken for being a range of cottages with multiple front doors, but there are intriguing references to much earlier details in the first floor south-facing window of the cellar. Fragments of tracery, the gable end wall of the chapel. The gable end wall of the Great Hall is characteristic of many industrial mill buildings. It's a building that has lost its historic context. And you can see on this slide the properties that are on all sides of the site. And highlighted in green is the lodging block, and that was the area that was being let out as holiday accommodation when we visited in 2017. Major consideration at Calverley has been to make the site accessible and sustainable. We've worked closely with our services consultants and archaeologists and clients to find ways of reducing the building's carbon footprint. This has meant improving the airtightness and breathability of the external envelope, insulating where we can, and incorporating the ground source heat pump to provide hot water and heating. So this slide just shows some of these masonry repairs. We've repointed, we've insulated the roofs where we can, we've replaced defective elements, and we've insulated the floors. And this has allowed us to consider a renewable heat source. And this is the site plan showing our 6 150-metre boreholes that are linked to a new plant room. And in order to do that, we needed to make sure that we weren't going to affect below ground archaeology. So there was quite a lot of site investigation before we could contemplate this. But we did think that it would be better long term to have the ground source than air source, just in terms of low maintenance, and it would be less noisy than a very built up area. The bottom 2 slides show how we intended to distribute the services once we got them into the building. So we were very fortunate that we had quite a central basement area, which was lined with modern brickwork. And the left-hand lower slide shows the incoming services from a plant room which was located on the north side of the building. So we've looked at, so this is the plant room. One of the drawbacks of the ground source heat pump is that you have to store the energy, and you can see that we've got a huge water tank there, which would have been really heavy. So that was one of the reasons why we decided to put everything into an external plant room. We've also introduced photovoltaic panels on a south-facing roof pitch, and where possible, we've exploited natural light and ventilation within the building. Real effort has been made to reuse materials from the site and to source new ones from the locality. There are 2 parking areas. One is access from the main road, from which a pathway leads to the southern doorway of what was once a cross passage. The second area is to the north of the site, and the accessible parking bay provides access to the northern door of the cross passage. The paths follow the site's contours to avoid ramps and handrail, which would have made the approach institutional. The path will be lit with little ground level solar lights. And the landscaping will remain very natural, but there will be new hedging to provide screening. Now we look at the interiors. At the time of the competition, the lodging block was the most complete of the interiors. It was heavily beamed with a large stone fireplace and a flagstone floor. And it was being let as a holiday apartment. The first impression of the remainder was of a series of cellular spaces, most of which had been decorated with a wide range of wallpapers, overboarded floors, and floors inserted to make practical use of very large volumes. The spear truss was partially visible within the first 4 bedrooms, but the most exciting view was to be found by crawling through a small loft hatch. The Great Hall and solar had both been derelict since the 1980s and were the reason for the manor being on Historic England's building risk register. These had been stripped out in the 1980s and were the easiest to interpret. You can see on this slide that the spear truss that sits just underneath the ceiling line is carved on one side, and that indicates that it's facing the high end, and it's plain on the other side. So we've now located the cross passage, and we've got an idea about where the high end and the low end of this building is. And then the lower slides are the view from falling into an attic space, looking towards the Great Hall. And then the middle slide is the north door to the cross passage, and that was buried in a lean-to kitchen extension, and it had been covered with an impervious layer of blue paint. But you'll see that later, and that was an amazing revelation once we'd taken down the lean-to to see this uncovered. So a lot of what we later discovered was masked by these layers, and it was just a very slow unpicking. The key to finding new uses for existing spaces is to understand how the space is once connected. Determining the circulation route is an important aspect of this. In Calverley, had many different phases, which made this analysis very challenging. There is a hierarchy of significance in any building. At Calverley, our client wanted to focus on the manor house prior to the departure of the Calverley family in the 17th century, which marked a milestone in how the building was used. Once the family had moved away, it was subdivided and made more practical for multiple occupancy. Research is key to our work on historic buildings. The story is often evident in the fabric, but where this has been covered up, we can look for clues from buildings of a similar age and typology. The spear truss was a very important element with a carved face towards the Great Hall and the plain one facing the solar. This immediately gives an orientation to the building, a high and a low end. We searched for evidence of cross passage in the location of the kitchen, buttery and pantry, but at Calverley that story is very complex, and it was only much later when we were working closely with an archaeologist that we began to accept that sometimes the answer remains unclear, and that's fine, it's just part of the narrative. What is important to us as we start to think about a building's next chapter is to ensure activities are given the best spaces for today's occupants, while being respectful of the past. Touch the ground lightly. Our interventions would be lightweight and reversible where possible. They should be legible so as not to interfere with the interpretation of the original dwelling. So here, this this 3D drawing shows the cross passage, which is quite central. And we can see on the right-hand side is the Great Hall. And on the left-hand side, we've got the solar.
Karen, we've just got a couple of people that are struggling to hear you a little bit. Is there any chance you can just sit a little bit closer to the microphone?
Yeah, I think it might be. I move this way. Is that better?
Yeah, I think if you move closer to the screen, that should hopefully help a little bit. Just got a few people that are saying it's just struggling to keep up, especially with the captions.
So here we are. So is that better?
I think that's a little bit better now, yeah.
So here we can see how everything is connected. Sometimes the date selected relates not only to the building but the wider context. So, for instance, at Stowe, for the National Trust, we would conserve the parklands to a date in the late 18th century. It was important that the new inn related to this. The date that is selected needs to consider the extent of fabric belonging to later periods too. So this is a picture of Stowe. It's a new inn, and we were very fortunate at Stowe because we had a sketch by Claude Naps, and that helped us to put back features that had been removed when we started to repair. But this happens on small projects and large projects. So at the David Parr House in Cambridge, the house had been decorated by David Parr in the 19th century, but had been lived in by 2 generations of his descendants. The last inhabitant being his granddaughter, who resided there until she was in her 90s. So it was decided that to strip the interiors back to the last of David's decorations would have been to lose 2 rooms that had had a change of use. And these changes were an important part of social history in themselves, so the decision was made to keep them. So each project, I suppose, has to be considered. And it's always very hard to know what should be removed and what should be retained. So I'm going to show you now the competition scheme. And you'll be able to see as we progress how it has changed as we have gained more knowledge. So the competition scheme was our starting point for testing a number of theories. One of these was to establish finished floor levels that would link spaces with as few changes of level as possible. Another was to identify any features that might inform the location or design of linking elements such as the lift and the staircase. Lastly, we needed to identify the condition of the fabric to make sure we could quantify the level of repairs in terms of time and cost. And that was really important because the Landmark Trust have been really fortunate in securing a grant from the National Heritage Lottery and also later on from Historic England. So we had a set budget and the design decisions were affected by that. A condition survey is always a good starting point for really getting to understand the building because it forces you to focus on the materials. You can see what has weathered well, what should be altered for the long-term good of the building, what is in very poor condition and beyond repair. This can provide opportunities for altering the design or infilling the voids. The open earth work was carried out in consultation with the conservation officer and our archaeologist. So if we look at the roof, for instance, it became clear that repairing the roof was critical for the conservation of the interiors, and we were very fortunate to be able to carry out the re-roofing work ahead of the main contract with a grant from Historic England. So this slide shows the roof that we found, and you'll see that it has a very narrow valley gutter. And later on, the slide will show you the condition of the fabric directly below that, and how by widening it and including trace heating, we could alleviate some of the problems. The hatched areas show the areas that we re-roofed and we could insulate to a good standard. Zone 2, we insulated the Great Hall roof on the underside without insulating. So Calverley had been partly re-roofed in the 1980s, but the solar and parlour block roofs were in full state of repair. There was a valley gutter that runs between the solar and parlour block, which is long and difficult to access. We made this wider in our re-roofing design and installed trace heating. The south-facing pitch of the solar is completely concealed from view at the ground floor level. We recognised an opportunity to install PV panels here, and there was an opportunity to install breathable insulation and provide a degree of airtightness to the roofs. So this slide shows what we found when we took the lead work up. We had quite a lot of replacement in this area. And we discovered that the roof members were reused from probably an 18th century timber framed building. So things are not always what you expect. The roof line has no original chimney stacks at Calverley, which is partly why the building looks like a series of cottages. However, buried within a void, there is the octagonal base of one of the original stacks. You can see that on the bottom right-hand side. Our philosophy at Calverley was to keep the memory of the later phases in the external appearance of the building. The fenestration, the chimney stacks, the multiple front doors. At Calverley, one of the stacks had been rendered and we discovered it was in very poor condition. This was rebuilt in stone using materials reclaimed from 2 porches that had been taken down. The construction phase of the re-roofing work at Calverley was very interesting. The solar roof members, as I said, were reused, but you can see the stubs of the original rafters on the top right-hand slide, much steeper pitch and much larger and oak. So you can see the changes and get an idea of what that part of the building might have looked like. And also very interesting was the number of objects that were buried next to the fireplace. And it was the number of objects that was really unusual, because apotropaic objects in buildings are not unusual in themselves, but just the number, the quantity, and the number of children's shoes and toys. You can see the little shoe that was pulled out of the rubble, and then the way it was catalogued later by the archaeologists. So
Karen, are you able to move just a little bit closer? Sorry, we've just got a few that are still struggling.
I wonder whether that one can.
I'm just wondering.
At Calverley Old Hall in Norfolk, our approach was different. We had a private client who wished to return the old hall dating from the 1570s to a single residence. It had been subdivided into a number of flats, and very little original fabric had survived within the building. We had evidence of the original octagonal stacks on the west elevation. Though the top left-hand slide, you can see just the stubs of the original stacks next to the finger. But they had all been rebuilt. During the construction phase, we inspected the stacks and found that they needed to be taken down to tile level and rebuilt. The decision was taken to seek approval for reinstating them in handmade bricks to the original form. So there, it's a different approach to a different client and different building. So then we move on to the interiors at Calverley and the cross passage. So accessibility was a key consideration. We were fortunate at Calverley that we didn't have any original ground floors that were deemed too precious to be lifted. The design needed to find a floor level that best suited each space whilst connecting to the adjacent spaces. Once we'd agreed on a strategy, we needed to test it with a number of trial holes to check the depth of the footings to walls. We didn't want to impose a level that would require underpinning unless it was absolutely necessary. It appears that there always had been a change of level within the Great Hall at the location of the 17th century masonry dividing wall. This was the deciding factor for the location of a platform lift that could take guests from the entry level within the cross passage down 500mm to the Great Hall or up to the first floor level. The lift was located on the north side of the building next to the external wall so that with limited underpinning we could connect to the external plant room. The new lime-free floor slab helped distribute services and provided an opportunity for underfloor heating, which could be linked to a renewable heat source. We found a hydraulic lift that didn't require a deep pit. We wanted it to be ceiling-less so that you could stand inside and be aware of the larger volume. So this is a picture showing the opening up works, and you can see that when we started opening up, we found a fireplace, and it's bisected by a wall that we took down as part of the scheme. But it did mean that we had to reposition the staircase. On the left-hand side, you can see the northern cross passage door, and the bottom photograph is of the jamb of the southern cross passage door. So it was very reassuring to find these features appearing, and so we knew we had the cross passage more or less in the right position. So then this is the plan that developed. We've got the cross passage. We've got a new stair and a new lift to link the spaces. We can use the lift and go down to the Great Hall on the right-hand side. And we can enter at the level of the cross passage and go into the solar. And the ground floor of the solar is divided into 2 bedrooms with 2 bathrooms. And one bathroom is an accessible bathroom. And the other bathroom, you have to go up 2 steps because it's actually built over the top of a vaulted cellar. I think we point out that the cellar runs below the solar and the lodging block. So immediately you begin to see that this building has had a change of shape. So then the aesthetics of the staircase and the cross passage. This was a design feature, and we felt it needed to be of our time with an economy of materials, but with references to the past. We wanted it to be freestanding so that the cross passage was kept clear. The design of this changed significantly when we found the 17th century cross wall. Our design was based on very primitive staircases, which were a series of logs stacked upon each other, and the development of the cantilever stair, which relied on interlocking elements to provide stability. The cross-laminated sections are expressed at the 3 ends of the staircase so that there is a truthfulness to materials. Cross-laminated sections are a more sustainable way of using wood, relying on small section sizes. So in this image, you can just about see the lift behind panelling. And the panelling in this area, because it's circulation space and not the Great Hall, we decided it should be birch-faced plywood with softwood trimmings. At Heckington Windmill, accessibility had always been an issue. The Grade 1 listed windmill had small doors and windows, and the mill had a series of raised platforms with ladder-type access. We were very fortunate to find that the outbuilding, which had been used for storage, had an infilled opening to the mill on one side. You can see that in the bottom middle photograph. And this was a wonderful opportunity to make the ground floor accessible for wheelchair users for the first time. So at Reckington, we inserted the floor that had been there. We could see there were holes for the joists. We inserted this floor, and there's a lift beyond this view in the photograph that takes you up through the outbuilding and into the mill. At Calverley, the new lift and staircase provide access to a first floor sitting room located in the solar, and beyond that there is access to the chapel, painted chamber and lodging block, which you'll see on the next slide, which is the first floor plan. So here we can see you come up either the staircase or the lift. You can look down into the Great Hall, or you can go into the solar. And then you go up some steps and into the painted chamber, which we'll talk about a bit later. And there's also access into the chapel from the solar. So the Great Hall, the challenge posed by the Great Hall was to integrate services and provide an acceptable level of comfort without compromising the historic features. The introduction of panelling was a way of providing a services route that didn't affect the stone. We imagined it being like a beautiful cabinet, so the shutters are in line with the panelling and a continuation of the walls rather than stepping in and out with the later door and window openings. We were able to add breathable insulation to the walls, and we used roofing modelling to ensure that we didn't adversely affect the fabric by changing its dew point. We found historic panelling stacked in the solar, so there was precedent for panelling in the building, but our panelling is oak-faced plywood with oak mentons and rails. And the flagstone floor was numbered and photographed and then carefully lifted, so that we could install an insulated limecrete floor with underfloor heating. And then we relaid the paving, and where we had taken down the walls and had no paving, we put smaller sections of stone infill into those areas so that you could still read the former layout. But this is an image that looks back towards the spear truss. So we've inserted a kitchen at one end of the Great Hall, and we can look up towards the gallery area over the cross passage. This is an image of the shutters closed and open in the Great Hall, and we've got a wood burning stove in the fireplace. And this is how we achieved that image. So we've taken up the floor here, we've put in our breathable limecrete floor, and we've started to relay the paving on the right-hand side. And this image shows how out of tune the walls are, and some of the challenges of installing new panelling. On the right-hand side, there is a sample of the panelling, minus the shutter, and that's being installed at the moment. Then we move on to the solar. So the solar, we spent a lot of time on this element of trying to find a solution for flooring the solar. And we worked very closely with the Morton Partnership to create a floor that would be as slender as possible and float off the walls. It needed to be a structure that could accommodate services. The historic walls were to remain unplastered, so electric cabling and plumbing, ductwork and the bathroom extracts all needed to be distributed through the ground and first floors. We felt it needed to be designed so that you could still appreciate the sawn-off floor joists of an earlier phase. You can see them just sticking out of the wall there on the left-hand side. Spans are reduced by the insertion of some very slim steel posts that were concealed within our studwork walls. There is a perimeter steel channel that allows the wooden joisted floor to be isolated from the historic walls, except in a few areas where steelwork connects to the masonry. Deciding on the exact location of the connecting points involved discussions with the archaeologists. The solar has predominantly unplastered walls, and the ancient masonry is by nature very rugged. We chose a ceiling material that could be perfectly flat and smooth to contrast the existing structure. The wall panelling is birch-based plywood with softwood rails and mountains, and you can see in the next slides the detailing. So there are the sawn-off joist ends. The bottom photograph shows the base of the first floor fireplace, which gives an indication of where the hearth was. This is the engineer's drawing showing the posts that were incorporated into our new studwork and the layout of the steelwork. And here is an image of one of the ground floor rooms, and you can see that we've created a recess so that you can see the joist ends on the right-hand side and the birch-based plywood panelling that is used for the new studwork. So it's of its time. The bathrooms are very neutral, but the small, highly reflective tiles catch the light and offset the chalky nature of lime-washed walls. Bob Costello Associates helped create a mechanical extract system that linked the two ground floor bathrooms to a single unit. This minimised ductwork within the floor zone, and the waste air from both areas will be extracted via a slot in the replacement door frame of one of the disused external doors. So here's an image of the first floor of the solar. A lot of time was spent discussing how best to conserve the visible face of the principal structure. The wall plates and one of the posts directly below the leaking valley gutter were very badly decayed. The photographs show how the post was different from the rear, and voids between the timber frame and the masonry were garroted with small sections of stone with ashlar masonry and small pieces of tile within red brickwork. So if we go to the next slide. So this is what we found below that leaking valley gutter. And we were really keen to conserve the visible face of the structure within the room. And this is the repair. The middle slide shows a remnant of the Orphan door in the corner of the timber frame, and that's being conserved. And then you can see the galleting in tile in brickwork on the top right-hand side, and the galleting in stone where we're infilling areas in ashlar masonry. So the painted chamber, so this was a very exciting find. The painted scheme had been protected by a wall lining of lath and plaster and softwood studs. The wall finishes and small tiled fireplace are thought to have been installed in the 1930s. The room may well have been panelled before that, but we have no conclusive evidence of this. Cuts in the skirting suggested that there had been a larger fireplace, and we carried out some opening up works during the early design stage to determine the size of this. The floor had been overboarded and was completely flat. The lath and plaster ceiling was deformed because there had been problems with the roof structure, resulting in movement to the external wall and cracks at the junction of the ceiling. This meant that the re-roofing work became a priority, and fortunately, by the time we were in a position to remove areas of the lath and plaster, We had a weathertight external envelope. The roof had been insulated and reslated, the external walls had been repointed, the chimney stack had been capped, and Lincoln University's Conservation Department had set up a system of remote monitoring so that electric heaters could be used to regulate the humidity. So you can see on the bottom middle slide, the wall plate being exposed. So that's on the window wall, above the window. And then on the right-hand side, the slide shows the plank and muntin internal walls. And what's unusual at Calverley is that the planks are actually stone slates that are plastered. So the painter scheme has been dated to the mid-16th century, and it's evident on 3 internal walls. The external wall had been rebuilt below the wall plate. The southwest-facing single-glazed window was boarded up and UV levels were monitored. The condition survey had highlighted the need to reinstate stone mullions to support the existing stone lintels. These were currently resting on a load-bearing wooden window frame that was now in very poor condition. When the wall linings were removed, the painter's scheme was protected by polycarbonate sheets, which were vented at the top and bottom. As designers, it's very important to know when specialists need to be consulted, and we consulted Toby Curtis and Associates at a very early stage, and our services consultants, Bob Costello and Associates, helped us to implement an environmental strategy that would provide as stable an environment as possible. So now we came to assessing the options. At Stiffkey Old Hall, we didn't want to leave the painter's services exposed. So Stiffkey Old Hall is shown on the left-hand side, and what you can see there is a fragment of the 18th century stencil design, but it's not a complete scheme. And there were lots of bits of gypsum plaster and later repairs when it was all removed. And the clients decided that they wanted to conserve it, but they didn't want to live with it. So there we had stretched linen fitted to battens at the floor and the ceiling, and they had an artist painter scheme on this. So that's one way of dealing with a painted room. On the right-hand side, we've got the David Parr house, and the external wall was so badly damaged that we actually had to remove the plaster, which had been overpainted, you can see, with a green gloss paint. And there, the client opted to reinstate the missing pattern on the external wall. So that there were different options, but the option that we've moved towards with Calverley, after openers carried out their condition survey, they discovered that actually the pigments were quite stable in natural light, and the substrate could be conserved. So here, the scheme is going to be left exposed. We are going to make sure that we have a very controlled environment. So we're drawing air in from the solar up through a fan, and then the air comes in through the new door case, through a slot in the door case, and into the room, and then air is drawn up through the grille in the ceiling. So this will help to achieve the optimum level of air changes per hour. We have insulated the external wall. We have permission to replace the window and reinstate the stone mullions. And we've proposed an external oak louver to filter any sunlight. And we've got inward opening bronze casements, but they will be closed to visitors, and inward opening just for the purposes of cleaning. So the next slide shows Opus Conservation doing some trial of cleaning methods, and it's a dry method of removing dirt and consolidating the substrate. And then the last slide is to do with this is not the last slide. So this is the room below. So we had a repair to make. You can see a very heavily carved primary beam in the left-hand photograph. Well, where it connected to the external wall, it had deteriorated. It had obviously been very wet. So on the next slide, you can see that we had to repair that so that we could conserve the floor of the painted chamber, which was of the same period as the painted scheme. So the next slide just shows what we did there. So on the left-hand side, you can see it had been overboarded. The boards were removed and the flitch repair was carried out. And on the right-hand side, that's the finish that we will have in the room. So that concludes the talk on the building. So over to you, Hannah.
Thank you, Karen. That was really, really interesting. Apologies, everybody, that the sound was a little bit hit and miss at times, but hopefully you should be okay by the end of it. It was a little bit better, so fingers crossed. We will make sure that before the recording goes out that we make sure that the captions are all correct underneath, so you'll be able to have another go with it with the proper captions underneath. So we've got a question that's come in, Karen, on the Q&A. If anybody would like to put more questions in there for Karen, that would be brilliant. But the first one that we've got is from Samantha, and she is interested in the contract types. So she said JCT, etc. So particularly, as mentioned, there was pre-contract re-roofing ahead of the main contract.
So there were 2 JCT contracts, and it was put out to tender, and we were very fortunate in having the same contractor on both phases, because actually we learnt a lot together on the first phase for the re-roofing work. And having the contract split, that wasn't the original intention, and it came about because the landmark trusts were very fortunate in gaining the grant, but it did give us more time, and I think particularly on this project, it's been really helpful to have the extra time.
That's fantastic. Thanks, Karen. I've got a question actually. Just as I was watching, I was thinking, which area of the building would you say was the most challenging, do you think, to design?
What do you think?
The solar.
The solar.
Solar. Why was it the most difficult, do you think?
It's the new floor, getting it right, the aesthetics, leaving the walls as they are, accommodating all of the old fabric as it is, and letting it tell the story, and inserting a new floor into that space that doesn't take away any of what's already there. Really difficult.
It's a very dramatic change, because I think all of us had that image of a 2-story space and standing there and looking at the roof exposed. Quite a powerful image.
Yeah. We've got a few more questions that have come in. So we've got one from Diane that's asking when the project is due to complete.
We hope to complete by March the 11th.
Fingers crossed.
Fingers crossed, that it really is now a military procedure to try and get everything completed. As far as we know, we've ordered everything. So, but there are always unforeseen things, and things take longer than you expect. So we're just hoping that we've covered everything.
And Richard's asking if we can tell them who the contractor was.
It was Dobson Construction Limited. They've been really good local contractors who were familiar with the site before they started. We have tried, where possible, to source local materials, and a lot of the subcontractors are local, so that's been very helpful.
And then Andrew's just saying, nice work, Karen, well done. How can we legislate against your ingenious vent slots to the door frames or roof joists from blocking with dust?
Well, we can install mesh to try, but it is good housekeeping And yeah, that's going to be probably something for the housekeepers to keep an eye on.
And then Diane's just asking, the shutters, do they slide into the panelling?
They do. Some of the shutters are hinged and they slide and they open into the reveals, and some of them slide, so they're top hung. We didn't want to see a trap along the bottom.
Oh, Diane's just saying she really loves them.
Good. Come and see them when they've been installed.
And then Natalie's asking, was there anything you would have done differently had Landmark not been the client?
Well,
it's quite hard, isn't it?
We've been really lucky with the Landmark because we seem to be on the same page. And it's been very good to have this limited budget because you have to be very careful with your design. And you can delay consignment.
I think so. Yeah.
So Hugh's also asking, you've mentioned airtightness. Was Pazzi House a methodology at all?
We would love to have gone down the Enefit route, but it would have been so hard. So we have done what we can. We have repointed, we've insulated where we can, we've got secondary glazing. We have got some replacement windows. We've replaced the floors. Our new doors will be draft stripped. We have put in chimney sheet. So it's still very breathable and it will be drafty. It won't ever meet the Passive House standards. But it will, I hope, be much more comfortable than it has been.
Oh, that's not hard because it was very cold in there when we first went in.
It was freezing, wasn't it?
And then one last question. Were you expecting the sort of number of challenges that Calverley threw up?
We were expecting challenges and we really enjoyed it. The discoveries made on site have been amazing. And to work with archaeologists and with the wall painting conservators, and with the contractors who are really interested in the building. That's been so good for everybody.
Yeah, it's been nice working as one big team.
Definitely, it has been a team effort.
And it'll be fab when it's done. So everybody come and have a look when it's finished. Well, I've not got any more questions that have popped up at the moment. Has anyone else got any last closing questions for Karen before we say goodbye? Oh, John's just asking, how will the project continue engagement with a wider audience for heritage post-completion? So will we showcase discoveries and archaeology, etc.?
I think that's over to you, Hannah. I think you are going to showcase things in the chapel.
Yeah, so we are. So what we're hoping to do is some of the archaeology objects that have come out, so some of the shoes and penny whistle and things that have come out, and we're hoping to have them on display. So certainly, if not all of them, certainly the nicer ones that we think people will be really interested in, we are hoping to have them out on display, potentially in the chapel area. So we're putting some interpretation in the chapel and in the community area. So hopefully we'll be able to actually display these lovely finds for people. We'll also have open days, so people will be able to come post restoration and come and have a look round. So you'll be able to see the space. Because it's lottery funded, we do have to open it a certain amount of times every year anyway, but we would like to do that because everybody's really interested in Calverley. And the Landmark Trust generally have lots of open days throughout the year. So if anyone's interested, there are lots of open days across the country, so do go along to your local one, but do come to Calverley and have a look when it's finished. And Karen's just asking, what are the subjects of the wall paintings?
I think there's going to be, I'm sure, another session on wall paintings because there are figures there and there are roses and lots of other features that someone more knowledgeable will be able to tell you more about. I'm sure they all have significance.
They're all a little bit quirky, aren't they, the wall paintings?
Oh, they're very quirky and they are coming to life now.
Yeah,
They're easier to decipher.
Yeah, they definitely are. There's all sorts on there that everybody sees something slightly different when you go in. So
yeah.
I think if nobody else has got any questions, we're pretty much bang on time. We're about 2 minutes ahead of schedule. So I just want to say thank you very, very much, Karen, for all of your time today. It's been a really, really helpful to have you here to talk through the project and your involvement, particularly with the project. And it's been a really interesting hour. So I just wanted to say thank you on everyone's behalf.